This video will take you through the dimensional design approach for the NorthWind, and it's based on the NorthWind case that is provided to you in the course material. So first you go ahead and open ESTA. You click File and New. Then we're going to create a ER diagram, which is here. Click that. Then following the 4-step approach, we first define the business process, then we declare the grain, then we identify the dimensions, and then we identify the facts. And since you are requested in this to model the sales process, then that is a given. The next one is, what is the grain in a sales process? And as you will recall, that is the most granular part of a sale. So if I have a sale composed of several different items, the grain is one of those items or one of those line items. So it might be like three blue goods, then it's the blue good that's going to be the grain here because it's a line item. If this confuses you, please see the video that is based on the game Overcooked. I think it explains it well. Then so the next step after grain, we've defined that as being the line item. We go ahead and define the dimensions that we need here, and the dimensions that are related to the sales process, because remember we're modeling one at a time of the Kimball bus matrix. The dimensions that are related here, the ones Andrew talked about in the case, is shipper, product, customer, and employee. So let's go ahead and put those into ESTA. So we go up here and we choose the entity tool, and then we write dim shipper, and I like to keep these in singular form rather than having them in plural form. Then we make another one which is going to be the dim customer, and another one called dim employee, because we are going to investigate accusations of nepotism and fraud at some point, right? Then another one with dim product here. Those are the dimensions. Then we can fill in all of the relevant attributes for this. So let's start out with the dim product. First of all, we need to add the key for the table. The key stays in here. Later in this course, we will replace the key with a surrogate key because we use surrogate keys to track changes in a data warehouse context. But we will return to that later in this course. But for now, just go ahead and add the business key, which is either the primary key or the composite primary key of your source table. So for the dimension product, the primary key will be product ID. And for the shipper dimension, let's add that as well up here. It's going to be shipper ID. And I like to keep naming conventions for these quite similar to what they are in the source system. But sometimes you may need to change them because you should make these diagrams and model them so that they are understandable and relatable to your end data user. But for now, since we're just modeling the stage tables, and I will show you how all that fits together during the course. If it doesn't really make sense to you right now, just keep with it. It's gonna make sense eventually. Then here for the dim customer, we need to add another one, which is gonna be then the customer ID. And then for employee, that is going to be, no wonder, employee ID. Now we need to add all the different attributes that we might need for investigating analysis. So for the product ID, for example, you might be interested in grouping your analysis, your sold items by product name. That would make sense to an end user, even though that these are going to be groups of one. You might also want to group them by supplier name. Supplier name here, and maybe you can have this, or you can decide not to have it. In some businesses, you might not refer to the supplier by their name, but maybe they have an ID, and maybe you want to keep that as well. But for now, you also need those IDs because you're going to need them to look up into the tables to actually get the supplier name. So for now, just have them in here, even though a group by based on that might not make sense to an end user. Keep it now, it's going to make sense. I promise it's going to make sense. Otherwise, we will discuss it in class. Then maybe supplier name. Maybe I want to see all my products by the supplier. Did I not? Oh, sorry. Product name, supplier ID. Yeah, oh, yeah, I'm making a mistake. So I'm getting to now category. Maybe I want to sort my dairy products from my toy products. So maybe you want to keep category in there. I think Andrew is mentioning something about dairy products being a special category that he's interested in. So we should definitely have that as well. So we put category name and category ID for looking up later. Then he also mentions having to be able to not include products that have been discontinued in analysis. So we need a flag for the discontinued. So let's put this. Sorry for spelling things wrong here. Let's put discontinued in there as well. Then for shipper, I don't think he doesn't mention any rich analysis here. He says something about negotiating shipping prices based on sales. So he definitely wants to sort sales by shipper at some point. So let's include shipper name here as well. I don't think there's anything more he's asking for, but that might be in your track work. So keep an eye out for that. Then on the customer, since this is a business-to-business segment, we're not looking at first and last names like individual customers, but it's going to be customers that are companies. So it's company name might be something we want to group on here. And then this is where it becomes a little bit more interesting, because if we make a group on a company name, the rows that are going to show up when we group on that is just all of the sales line generated to that customer. But maybe we want to make an analysis where we can actually see if different countries are being served better, or different regions within a country is being served better, or maybe we want to do it at the city level. It often becomes much more interesting for the end user when the groups are actually groups of more than one from an analytics perspective. And again, I promise, if it doesn't really make sense to you right now, it will eventually. By the time we are midway in this course, we will have covered all of the, you could say, different disciplines in this data warehousing and analytics, and I'm sure it will make much better sense to you by then. So if we want to have these groups where the group becomes more than one, we need to consider what could they be. And Andrew mentioned something about geographically being able to analyze these cells. And what do we have in our source system that relates to geography? Well, we have a city for one. We also have a region, and we have a sorry for this. And we also have postal code, and we have country. So let's add those. Then for employee, what do we have with employees that makes sense? Well, in Andrew's case, he says that he's going to investigate if a particular employee is serving very nice discounts to their customer who's a cousin. So definitely he wants to be able to see it by each of the individual employees. So let's add employee name as an attribute. And another attribute that could go on there, and that is likely, is that maybe he wants to group by the salespeople, and then not by the people who are working in logistics or administrative functions, so that maybe title makes sense as well. If title represents what kind of job they're doing within the company, then that makes sense. If the title was Mr. and Mrs., it probably would not make sense. And then just like in the customer sense, we also have some geographic information on the employee that might make sense. If you're working in a real environment doing this dimensional modeling and implementing data warehouses, of course you will have an entire process in which you're doing requirement specs with your different stakeholders within the company, and you can actually try and ask them these things. But at the same time, you need to keep an eye out for the fact that these dimensions should be conformed, in the sense that they should be shared amongst the different kinds of processes that you would be modeling. So if you're modeling employee now to enter it into the sales process, you should still be considering what are the needs of other business functions that might want to use this dimension in their process. And this is where it becomes a little bit hard in a teaching session also is because we will through this course only model one process. So having this dimension of conformity is a little bit hard to cover, but I hope that I gave you an idea of how that works now. Then just like with customer, let's add city here, and let's add region. That was spelled wrong. Please ignore if I misspell things. Then postal code as well, and postal code, and the final one, country. I think that covers it. Let me just check with my notes. Yes. Then the last step on this dimensional design approach, of course, is defining the facts. So we should make the fact table here, and let's call, again, singular fact cell. Then the fact cells table, the primary key on that table is going to be a composite of all the foreign keys to the dimension tables. So if you now drag this relationship, let's see if we can do that. Yes. And you put that on the fact table, it's automatically going to add the foreign key relationship to product ID. And we do the same. We do the same here. Yes. And we do the same over here. These mini icons can be a little difficult to get a hold of, and we do the same here. Then since the grain here is going to be each individual line item, and we need some information both from the header table and from the line table, we need, at least for the staging area, also to have the order ID, because that's going to link the header and the line table. So that should go in there as well. Add another primary key with order ID. That's going to be removed eventually, but for now, keep it there. Then what are the facts that he's looking for? Well, he says something with amount. What is amount going to be? It's not going to be a sum, because each of the lines here, remember, there are line items. So it's not going to be the final, the total sum of that cell. But if I group on an individual cell, then all of the line items summed together is going to be that amount. So we need the line total. That's going to be the individual amount here. And he also says something about quantity. So seeing how many items have been added. And then because of this accusation of nepotism, he also wants to see discount. So those are the facts that he's going to be looking for. Then eventually, and we will deal with this later in the course again, just bear with me, it's all going to click eventually. We also need to have time in here. For now, I'm not going to put it in here, because we need to know how Kimball deals with date and time, which is different from what you might expect. But in order to look that up, we also need two different kinds of dates on the fact table. So I'm going to add those now, and we will return to them. But we need order date and we need ship date. And then if I want to change this notation from the IDEF1X into the Crowfoot's notation, which I much prefer to look at, then I just go over here and I change it. Again, if you want to change it into a UML diagram, you can do that, but it's a lot of work that I don't want to be dealing with right now. And since I will be using this later, it's nice to prettify it a little bit and have it have these straight, and the other one as well, because then when I copy it into my report, it's gonna look nice. Just prettify it a little bit. Yep. And then you're done with modeling the ER diagram of the dimensional model for NorthWind. And if you have any questions, just use the discussion board or bring them to class.